On September 22, 1942, a 27-year-old clerk from the Soviet Pacific Fleet stood on the eastern bank of the Volga River, watching the city of Stalingrad burn. The sky was black with smoke. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and burning flesh. Behind him, thousands of terrified Soviet soldiers pressed forward, waiting for the boats that would carry them across the river and into hell. The commissars had made it clear. There was no retreat. Stalin had given his order number 227. Not one step back. Cross the river or face a firing squad. This man was Vasily Grigorievich Zaitsev. He had spent 5 years in Vladivostok filing paperwork for the artillery department. He had never fired a shot in combat. He was just a clerk, a shepherd boy from the Ural Mountains who had been keeping ledgers while better men fought and died. As far as the Red Army was concerned, he was filler, cannon fodder, a body to slow down the German advance. But the commissars had made a fatal mistake. They saw a clerk with soft hands and clean uniforms. They didn't see what the wolves of the Urals had created. They didn't see the eyes of a hunter who had been dropping game at 400 meters since he was 12 years old. They didn't see the patience of a boy who had spent entire days lying motionless in snow, waiting for a single shot. This clerk's name was Vasily Zaitsev, and in 23 days, this too-soft paper pusher would break the most elite sniper the Wehrmacht could send against him by using a trick so simple, so counterintuitive, that it would rewrite Soviet sniper doctrine and turn the tide at Stalingrad. The story doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins in the crushing isolation of the Ural Mountains. Vasily was born on March 23, 1915, in Yeleninskoye, a village so remote it barely appeared on maps. His family were peasants, surviving on whatever they could hunt or grow in the brutal Siberian wilderness. His grandfather was a hunter. His father had fought in the First World War under General Brusilov. Survival wasn't a skill here. It was the baseline. The Ural forests were deep and lethal. Bears roamed freely. Wolf packs hunted in the winter. The temperature could drop to -40. A single mistake, a moment of carelessness, meant death. The village itself was a collection of wooden houses clustered along the bank of the Saram-Sakal River. There was no electricity, no running water, no market to visit. The nearest town was a 3-day journey on horseback. In winter, they were completely cut off from the outside world. The families that survived here did so through brutal self-sufficiency. Young Vasily learned to hunt, not because he wanted to, but because his family needed to eat. His grandfather took him into the forests when he was barely 4 years old. His first weapon was a simple bow. His first targets were squirrels. The lessons began before dawn. His grandfather would wake him while it was still dark. They would eat a piece of black bread, drink hot tea, and head into the forest before sunrise. For hours, sometimes entire days, they would sit in complete silence. Vasily learned to read the forest. The way birds moved warned of predators. The direction deer traveled indicated water sources. The tracks in snow told stories of what had passed hours before. His grandfather's instruction was cold and precise. Be still like a stone. Control your breathing. 1 shot, no waste. Bullets cost money. Noise scares game. If you miss, you starve. This wasn't practice. This was arithmetic. Calculate distance, windage, the animal's movement. Aim where it will be, not where it is. Fire. Kill. Every summer, Vasily worked as a shepherd, tending livestock in the mountain pastures. He would spend weeks alone with only a dog for company. He learned to move silently. He learned to observe without being observed. He learned that patience was the hunter's greatest weapon. Impatience meant empty hands. Empty hands meant hunger. By age 12, Vasily had graduated from squirrels to wolves. The wolves were the real test. They were intelligent, wary, dangerous. They hunted in packs. They could smell human scent from a mile away. They never made the same mistake twice. His grandfather gave him a single-shot 20-gauge shotgun that the boy could barely lift. He was given 5 shells. If he came back with no wolf and no shells, he would be punished. The message was clear. Make every shot count. Vasily tracked a wolf pack for 3 days. He studied their patterns. He learned where they den up during the day. He found their killing grounds, where they took down deer. He identified the alpha male by his larger tracks and confident gait. On the 3rd day, just before dawn, Vasily positioned himself downwind of the den. He waited for 4 hours without moving. The sun rose, the temperature climbed, his muscles cramped. He ignored it. Finally, the alpha emerged. The wolf paused, sniffing the air. 200 meters away. Vasily controlled his breathing. He aimed where the wolf would be when the bullet arrived. He fired. The wolf dropped instantly. 1 shot, clean kill. The family ate. That was the hunter's code. No emotion, no hesitation, just cold efficiency. His younger brother later recalled that Vasily could drop a running deer at 400 meters with iron sights. He could shoot squirrels out of trees without damaging the meat. He understood windage instinctively, adjusting for gusts without conscious thought. Under that pressure, under those impossible conditions, Vasily Zaitsev didn't just learn to shoot. He learned to hunt. He developed a hunter's patience that could outlast any prey. He developed a predator's instinct that could anticipate movement before it happened. He developed a mathematical understanding of bullet trajectory that no military academy could teach. The Ural Mountains had created a weapon. They just didn't know it yet. When Vasily turned 17 in 1932, he left the mountains. He attended Magnitogorsk Construction College, studying to become a fitter and learning accounting. He wanted more than the hard life of a peasant hunter. In 1937, at age 22, he joined the Soviet Pacific Fleet. He became a clerk in the artillery department. He wore the blue and white uniform of a Soviet sailor. He kept ledgers. He filed reports. He was stationed in Vladivostok, thousands of miles from the coming war. It was safe. It was comfortable. It was slowly killing him. When Operation Barbarossa began on June 22, 1941, Vasily watched from the Far East as the Wehrmacht tore into the Soviet Union like a chainsaw through flesh. 3 million German soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 2,500 aircraft. The Red Army was being annihilated. Cities fell in days. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. By the summer of 1942, the Germans had reached Stalingrad, the city on the Volga, Stalin's city, the symbolic and strategic linchpin of the entire southern front. Its fall would cut Soviet supply lines, expose the oil fields of the Caucasus, and potentially end the war. Vasily requested a transfer. 5 times, 5 rejections. The Navy needed clerks. His superiors told him to keep filing his reports, do his duty at his desk. But Vasily had that chisu, that shepherd's stubbornness. He was a hunter, watching prey from a distance. He belonged in the field. Finally, in August 1942, his request was granted. He was transferred to the 1047th Rifle Regiment of the 284th Tomsk Rifle Division. His rank was Senior Warrant Officer. His assignment was Stalingrad. He had no idea what he had just volunteered for. The Battle of Stalingrad was not a battle. It was an apocalypse. By September 1942, the city was a moonscape of rubble, fire, and corpses. German artillery pounded the ruins 24 hours a day. Luftwaffe bombers turned entire districts to ash. Soviet defenders fought from cellars, sewers, and shell craters. The Volga River ran red with blood. Bodies floated downstream in such numbers that soldiers used them as landmarks for navigation. The smell was unforgettable. Burning flesh, sewage, cordite, decay. It clung to everything. Soldiers said you could taste death in the air. The average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier arriving at Stalingrad was 24 hours. Company commanders lasted 3 days. Entire regiments would cross the Volga at full strength and cease to exist by morning. This was the mathematics of annihilation. Stalin had given his order number 227. Not one step back. The commissars had machine guns trained on the river crossings. Advance into Stalingrad or be shot for cowardice. There was no third option. Vasily Zaitsev crossed the Volga on the night of September 22, 1942. The boats were packed with terrified conscripts. Most had never fired their rifles. Many had no weapons at all. They were told they would get rifles from dead comrades. The crossing took 20 minutes. It felt like hours. German artillery had the river bracketed. Every few seconds, shells exploded in the water, sending up geysers of spray and shrapnel. Men screamed as boats disintegrated. Bodies floated past in the darkness, their faces pale and bloated. Vasily gripped his rifle and stared straight ahead. The boat made it across. Vasily stumbled onto the western bank and immediately dove into a shell crater. The shore was under constant bombardment. Explosions tore through the night. Tracer rounds streaked overhead like angry fireflies. Machine gun fire rattled from a dozen directions. All around him was chaos. New arrivals ran aimlessly, seeking cover that didn't exist. Veterans screamed orders that nobody could hear over the explosions. Commissars waved pistols and threatened to shoot anyone who hesitated. Men died within seconds of landing. Some were hit by artillery, some by machine guns. Some simply collapsed from fear or exhaustion and were trampled by the soldiers coming after them. Vasily took cover in the shell crater and stayed perfectly still. This was the first lesson his grandfather had taught him. When you don't know the terrain, don't move, observe, learn, survive. For 6 hours he lay in that crater. He watched the patterns of German fire. He memorized the terrain. He studied the ruins. And slowly, through the chaos and terror, he began to see it. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a hunting ground. The rubble provided concealment. The shattered buildings created lanes of fire. The Germans were confident, moving in the open during daylight. They believed they had already won. They were wrong. His first combat was not heroic. It was survival. The next morning, as the sun rose over the ruined city, Vasily's squad was ordered to advance toward the factory district. They moved through rubble-strewn streets, ducking from cover to cover. A German machine gun team set up position 600 meters away. They had perfect fields of fire down the main avenue. Vasily's squad was pinned down immediately. Men were dying in the open, cut down as they tried to move. The lieutenant was shot through the throat. The sergeant took shrapnel to the legs. The political commissar was screaming orders that made no tactical sense. Vasily did what he had done 1,000 times in the Urals. He went still. He observed. He calculated. He found the pattern. The machine gunner was wearing a distinctive helmet. His assistant fed the ammunition belt in a predictable rhythm. Every 30 seconds, they would pause to adjust their aim or reload. That was the moment of vulnerability. Vasily raised his standard-issue Mosin-Nagant rifle. No scope, just iron sights. He controlled his breathing. He calculated the distance, the wind, the bullet drop. The machine gunner paused to wipe sweat from his face. Vasily fired once. The round traveled 600 meters in less than a second. It struck the gunner directly in the head. He collapsed over his weapon. The entire German position went silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the German assistant gunner grabbed the weapon and tried to resume fire. Vasily fired again. The assistant dropped. Now the Germans were panicking. They abandoned the machine gun and retreated. Vasily's commander, a political officer named Danilov, had been hiding nearby. He saw the shot. He saw the distance. He saw something the Red Army desperately needed. A symbol. A hero. Within days, Danilov began writing articles about Vasily in the army newspaper. The shepherd from the Urals. The man who could kill at impossible distances with iron sights. The soldier who moved through the ruins like a ghost. Soviet high command seized on this. The propaganda value was incalculable. The Germans were winning. Soviet morale was collapsing. They needed hope. Vasily was promoted to the sniper division. He was given a Mosin-Nagant with a PU optical scope. His mission was simple. Kill German officers. Kill German NCOs. Kill anyone who gave orders. Disrupt. Demoralize. Destroy. In his first 10 days as an official sniper, Vasily killed 40 Germans. His method was the hunter's method. He would arrive at a position before dawn. He would lay completely still for hours, sometimes buried under rubble or hiding in drainage pipes. He would study the terrain. He would map every detail in his head. He would wait for the perfect shot. Then he would fire. One shot, one kill. Then he would relocate before the Germans could pinpoint his position. By October 1942, his official count was over 100. The Germans were terrified. Officers refused to move in daylight. NCOs covered their insignia. Entire companies would halt their advance because of rumors that the Russian ghost was nearby. Soviet propaganda called him the Har. His last name, Zaitsev, meant Har in Russian. The Germans had a different name. They called him Death. But Vasily had discovered something that the military academies and sniper schools had missed. Something that would become his piano wire fix. The doctrine said to use high ground. Find elevation. Shoot down at your targets. Vasily ignored this. In the rubble of Stalingrad, high ground was a death sentence. German artillery observers watched every rooftop. German counter-snipers scanned every elevated position. Instead, Vasily went low. He would hide in basements, in sewers, behind piles of bricks at ground level. He would shoot upward or across flat terrain. The Germans were looking up. He was below them. The second innovation was movement. Standard. Doctrine said establish a hide and stay there. Vasily developed a system he called the Sixes, 3 pairs of soldiers, a sniper and a scout at each position. They would cover overlapping fields of fire. When one pair fired, the others observed and protected. After a few kills, all 3 pairs would relocate simultaneously. The Germans couldn't track them. It was wolf pack tactics applied to urban warfare. The third trick was the decoy. This was the stupid innovation that would define his legend. Vasily understood something fundamental about snipers. They're hunters, and hunters can't resist investigating their kills. He would build dummy positions, crude mannequins dressed in Soviet uniforms, helmets propped up on sticks. He would place them in obvious sniper hides, high windows, rubble piles with clear sightlines. Then he would wait. When a German sniper took the bait and fired at the dummy, Vasily would watch for the muzzle flash. He wouldn't return fire immediately. That's what the German expected. Instead, he would wait. He would study the position. He would watch for hours, sometimes days, until the German sniper made a mistake, showed a glint of scope glass, shifted position, lit a cigarette. Then Vasily would fire. One shot. The German would never see it coming. By November 1942, Vasily Zaitsev had killed over 150 German soldiers. His reputation had spread beyond Stalingrad. He was training other snipers in his methods. Soviet propaganda had turned him into a national hero. Radio Moscow broadcast his exploits. Soldiers wrote his name on ammunition. What the Soviet propagandists celebrated, the German high command mourned. This is the enemy reaction. This is the moment that validates the threat. Reports were flooding back from the Stalingrad front. Officers killed in broad daylight. NCOs shot while giving orders. A sniper so effective, so invisible, that entire German units were paralyzed by fear. The German response was predictable. They sent their own hunter. According to Zaitsev's memoirs, in early November 1942, a captured German prisoner told Soviet interrogators that a special sniper had been sent to Stalingrad. His mission was singular: find Zaitsev, kill him, restore German morale. Zaitsev claimed his name was Major Erwin König, or Heinzen Thorwald. He claimed König was the head of a Wehrmacht sniper school near Berlin. He claimed König had over 400 kills. There is no German military record of Major Erwin König. No documentation. No personnel file. Many historians believe König was created by Soviet propaganda. But Zaitsev mentioned in his memoirs that a 3-day duel did occur, and that he killed a German sniper he believed was a sniper school director. Whether König existed or not, what happened next was real. A German sniper arrived in Stalingrad, specifically hunting for Soviet snipers. Over 3 days in mid-November, members of Zaitsev's sniper teams were killed. His spotter, Kulikov, identified a pattern. The Germans were using bait. Wounded soldiers calling for help. Officers deliberately exposing themselves. When Soviet snipers took the shot, the German would fire from a concealed position. This was a master at work. Zaitsev recognized the tactic immediately. It was what he had been doing to the Germans for weeks. He was being hunted by someone who thought like him. The duel began. For 3 days, Zaitsev and this German sniper played a deadly game of chess in the ruins. Each would set traps. Each would use decoys. Each would wait for the other to make a mistake. This was not like hunting wolves. Wolves operated on instinct. This German operated on training, experience, and calculation. He was, without question, a master. On the first day, November 10th, the German killed one of Zaitsev's students, a young sniper named Anton, barely 19 years old. Anton had taken up position in a bombed-out apartment building. Good concealment, excellent sight lines. By the textbook, it was perfect. At 9:47 a.m., Anton was shot through the head from an unknown position. The round entered just above his right eye. He died instantly. Zaitsev examined the body and the trajectory. The shot had come from ground level, approximately 300 meters away. But from where? The German had left no trace. No muzzle flash. No disturbance in the rubble. This was someone who understood concealment as well as Zaitsev did. Maybe better. On the second day, the German killed a political commissar named Danilov, the same man who had first recognized Zaitsev's talent. Danilov had accompanied Zaitsev to observe the hunt for this German sniper. In his enthusiasm, Danilov thought he had spotted the German's position. He stood up to point it out. It was the last mistake he would ever make. The shot came instantly. It struck Danilov in the shoulder, shattering his collarbone and puncturing his lung. He collapsed, screaming. Zaitsev dragged him to cover, but the message was clear. The German had been watching them the entire time. He had waited for someone to make a mistake. When they did, he fired. This was professional, clinical, deadly. Zaitsev was shaken. He had never faced an opponent like this. The German thought like him, anticipated like him, hunted like him. For the first time since arriving at Stalingrad, Vasily Zaitsev felt genuine fear. That night, Zaitsev and his spotter Nikolai Kulikov analyzed what they knew. They had narrowed the Germans' position to a 200-meter section of rubble near a destroyed factory. Within that section were dozens of possible hides. Any of them could conceal a sniper. Searching openly would be suicide. They needed to make the German reveal himself. Zaitsev was watching. He saw the muzzle flash. It came from beneath a sheet of metal near a destroyed tank. But he didn't fire. That's what the German expected. Instead, Zaitsev built his trap. He created a dummy position in a bombed-out building, a helmet on a stick, a coat draped over rubble to look like a body. He positioned it so that anyone watching would think a Soviet sniper was hiding there. Then Zaitsev hid 50 meters away with perfect sight lines to the metal sheet. On the morning of the third day, November 12th, the German took the bait. A single shot rang out. The dummy's helmet flew off. For a moment, nothing. Then slowly, a figure emerged from beneath the metal sheet. The German sniper, believing he had killed Zaitsev, wanted to verify his kill. It's the hunter's instinct. You have to see your prize. Zaitsev was already aiming. His crosshairs were steady on the figure crawling out from the hide. He controlled his breathing. One shot. The German sniper collapsed. Zaitsev and Kulikov approached the body cautiously. It was a German soldier wearing a sniper's camouflage. Zaitsev took the rifle scope as a souvenir, which is now displayed at the Central Armed Forces Museum in Moscow. Whether this was the legendary König or just another skilled German sniper, it didn't matter. The psychological victory was complete. The Germans had sent their best. The hare had killed him. Soviet propaganda exploded. The story of Vasily Zaitsev defeating Germany's master sniper spread across the front. It was exactly what Soviet morale needed. The myth became more powerful than the man. But myths have costs. Between September and December 1942, Vasily Zaitsev killed 225 German soldiers. By his own estimation, the number was closer to 242, when including unconfirmed kills. He had trained dozens of other snipers in his methods. His students went on to kill hundreds more. The sixes tactic became standard Soviet sniper doctrine. His decoy techniques were taught in sniper schools across the Red Army. His low-ground strategy revolutionized urban warfare tactics. But in January 1943, the cost came due. On January 10th, during a Soviet offensive, a German mortar round exploded near Zaitsev's position. Shrapnel tore through his face. Fragments embedded in both eyes. He was blinded. He fell to the ground, blood pouring from his face. His fellow soldiers dragged him to a medical station, certain he would die. The doctors were overwhelmed. Hundreds of wounded men needed treatment. Zaitsev's eye injuries were severe. Without specialized care, he would be permanently blind. But Vasily Zaitsev was now too valuable to lose. Soviet High Command intervened. He was evacuated from Stalingrad and sent to Moscow. There, he was treated by Professor Vladimir Filatov, the Soviet Union's leading ophthalmologist. Filatov had pioneered corneal transplant techniques. Over several months and multiple surgeries, he slowly restored Zaitsev's vision. It was not perfect. Zaitsev had permanent scarring. His depth perception was compromised, but he could see. He returned to combat in 1943, participating in the Battle of Silo Heights in April 1945. For his service, he was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union in February 1943, along with the Order of Lenin and Gold Star Medal. But the war had changed him. The cold efficiency that made him deadly also made him haunted. He had killed over 300 men. He could remember many of their faces. So what happens to a man who becomes a symbol when the war ends? What happens to the hunter when there's no more prey? Vasily Zaitsev returned to civilian life quietly. He moved to Kiev. He studied at a textile university. He became an engineer. He married. He worked in a factory. He rarely spoke of the war. When journalists found him decades later and asked about his kills, his response was pure hunter's logic. When asked in 1998 how he became such a good shot, he gave a one-word answer: practice. He lived simply. He refused to profit from his fame. He turned down book deals and movie offers. He wanted only to be left alone. Vasily Zaitsev died on December 15, 1991, in Kiev, at age 76, just 10 days before the Soviet Union collapsed. Initially buried in Kiev, his body was reburied with full military honors on January 31, 2006, at the Mamayev Kurgan Memorial in Volgograd, formerly Stalingrad. His dying wish had been to be buried with his comrades on the hill they had defended. His coffin was carried to the monument, where his famous quote is engraved: "For us there was no land beyond the Volga. This is the true legacy. This is the ripple effect." Vasily Zaitsev did more than kill 225 Germans in 100 days. He broke the myth of German invincibility at Stalingrad. His tactics, his decoys, his low ground strategy, his sixes formation, these became Soviet doctrine. They were taught to every sniper in the Red Army. They saved thousands of Soviet lives. They killed thousands of German soldiers. But more importantly, he proved something the Soviet people desperately needed to believe: that skill could defeat technology, that patience could defeat firepower, that a shepherd from the Urals could hunt the hunters, that one man with iron sights and a hunter's heart could change the course of the bloodiest battle in human history. The piano wire was the decoy. The fatal flaw was that the Germans expected Soviet snipers to fight like soldiers. Vasily fought like a hunter. He used bait. He studied his prey. He waited for days without moving. He shot where his target would be, not where it was. The stupid innovation was hiding at ground level, using dummies, relocating constantly. Military doctrine said this was wrong. The hunter's instinct said it was right. The crazy result was 225 confirmed kills in 100 days and the psychological destruction of German sniper operations at Stalingrad. That's how wars are truly won. Not by the generals who study maps in warm headquarters, but by the individuals who see the fatal flaw. James McKenna saw a flaw in the P-38's control cable. Simo Häyhä saw a flaw in sniper scopes. And Vasily Zaitsev saw a flaw in military doctrine. The experts said, use elevation. Zaitsev went low. The experts said, stay in position. Zaitsev kept moving. The experts said, engage your target. Zaitsev engaged the hunter, hunting him. Vasily Zaitsev remains one of the most effective snipers in military history. His Mosin-Nagant rifle with PU scope is displayed in Volgograd. The scope he took from his German opponent is in Moscow. His story inspired the 2001 film Enemy at the Gates. But the real story is simpler and more profound than any movie. A shepherd learned to hunt wolves in the Urals. A clerk volunteered for hell. A soldier became a hunter. A man discovered that the patience learned feeding his family in the wilderness could feed an entire army with hope. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.